Good morning and welcome back to Training Thursday here on Gaming with ADHD, where today we're going to continue our deep dive into the basics of Warhammer 40,000 10th edition as provided in the Combat Patrol magazine from Hachette Publications and Games Workshop. Now, if this is your first time here, basically these videos are basically read-throughs and kind of my thoughts on how they're presenting Warhammer 40,000 to new players. So it's going to cover basically the topics as they present them in the order that they recommend them, and I'll just kind of give you my thoughts on whether I think it's a good explanation or something that they could have explained a little better, but we'll go from there. So with that said, don't forget, subscribe to the channel. I try to put out a few videos each week or do live streams where I'm painting models, talking about role-playing games, whatever it is. And I'd love for you to come along and see what we have to share. So with that said, let's get into it. All right, so today we are talking about dice and modifiers. Obviously, this is a war game, and so you need some way to deal with the randomness of the battlefield. And in war games, that's done typically with dice. So let's see. Let's switch over to this window. All right. Dice and modifiers. In battle, nothing is certain. Raw recruits may prove to have valor beyond their years, while veteran warriors may disgrace themselves with terrible failures. In games of Warhammer 40,000, the unpredictable chaos of the battlefield is represented by rolling dice. By now, you should be pretty comfortable rolling dice. Dice are used to determine the results of many events in Warhammer 40,000. When you roll a dice, you're usually looking for a target number. You'll only ever need to roll six-sided dice, also known as D6s, in Warhammer 40,000. When you are told to roll a D3, roll a six-sided dice and compare it to the results on the right. Basically, you don't have to look at a chart, okay? D3, you roll it and divide by 2, all right? So, divide by 2, round up. So, 1 and 2 is 1, 3 and 4 is 2, 5 and 6 is 3. Pretty self-explanatory. Typically, you're going to see D3 for like number of wounds or number of attacks, where they want to add some randomness to the particular weapon, like a grenade or like for Tyranids for like a giant bioblast or something, where it's not predictable how many opponents it's actually going to hit. So not very common. Basically, you're just going to have to just keep an eye on the data sheet for your units. And if you ever see D3, this is when you're going to use that. Let's see. It is good practice to always roll your dice where your opponent can see them and to let your opponent check the results before you start re-rolling or moving them. 1,000% yes. Okay. Dice trays are always useful. There are just like you can get some very nice ones. You can get some very cheap ones. You can get a dice cup and, roll the dice and then just, tip the cup over. And then just kind of let the dice fall out. There's 1,000 different ways to do it. Don't go nuts. Don't, think that you need to go full on, like ninja attack, throwing a bunch of dice out there. But as obviously make sure that your opponent can see it. If you say, oh, I got all 6s, but you quickly pick up the dice, your opponent's not going to trust you. So roll them out in the open. And, it's fine to start kind of moving them around, but be careful, make sure that you're picking it up and moving. Like I like to separate my dice. So all of the hits will go to one side, all of the misses will go to the other. And so again, just be extremely careful. Don't push where it's going to end up rolling the dice, things like that. Keep it easy. That way, your friends want to keep playing the game with you. All right. Let's see. Sometimes the dice may not land flat on the table, or it might roll off the table completely. Most players just ignore these results and make them again to ensure the results of the roll are clear and unambiguous. All right, so I actually kind of like this example right here. So they've got this D6 that's been that's been laid up so it's completely cocked off the base of the wing Tyranid Prime. So in this particular situation, what is normal for me, and at least when I have played games in my area, in this particular situation, you would use what's called a balance test. Okay, so you can grab one of these other dice, probably like this one right here, the one which is a miss, and you can pick that up. And the general rule is if you can balance another die on top of the one that's laying at an angle, then you can keep the result. Like in this case, that's a 5. Probably going to be really good. Probably a hit or a wound. You might want to keep that. But obviously, in this particular case, it's kind of obvious. It's most likely not going to do it. But if you want to try, that is one way to kind of settle that argument. Not everybody is going to like that, but it's generally pretty reasonable. So, because there are times where on your game board or the piece of terrain or whatever, where it's not like it's a little bit angled because like it landed on top of a rock, but it's just a slight. Anyways, I'm getting super nitpicky, but again, keep that in mind that it is it's something where there are ways to adjudicate that. Be fair with your opponent. Let the guy get the good rolls sometimes, but call him on it. Can't balance the dice. Sorry, got to re-roll it. The other thing that I would point out, actually, it does say here, a dice may not land flat on the table, or it might roll off the table completely. In my house, at my games, if the dice isn't on the table at the end of the roll, then it doesn't count. You have to re-roll it. I don't care what it was. But if you're constantly rolling such that your dice is going off of the table, I'm going to force you to use a dice tray or a dice cup. So keep that kind of stuff in mind. Play nice. All right. Dice re-rolls. Some units and special rules allow you to re-roll dice you have already rolled for a given test in order to try and get a different result. For example, some rules allow you to re-roll failed hit rolls, making your attacks more accurate. Whatever the case, and however many special rules are offering you a re-roll, you can only re-roll a dice roll made for any one test once. Okay, so you can't stack your re-rolls. You get one, or if you have a re-roll, you get one additional, bite at the apple, as they say. Additionally, you must stick with the result of the second roll, even if it is worse. So in this particular case, what I would typically do, like I said, I like to separate my hits versus my misses. If I'm going to re-roll, I'm typically going to grab from the misses. If I end up, if it's a game with exploding dice, I'll bring in extra dice if re-rolling ends up needing extra dice. Typically, you're not going to see that in games of Warhammer, but again, if you have something that has, those kinds of things, again, just re-roll your misses, and then that way you don't have to try and remember, how many hits did I have? Your dice get all mixed up. So just a simple way to do it, but again, that's me. All right, modifiers. Nothing in battle is certain, but skilled warriors, advanced equipment, psychic powers, and other assets can help a general to manipulate the odds in their favor. In Warhammer 40,000, this is represented by modifiers, rules that can change the value of dice rolls and the characteristics of your units, for better and for worse. Modifying dice. You'll find yourself modifying dice rolls almost every time your models are attacked. Generally, you'll be modifying the save roll for your models based on the AP characteristic of the weapon being used to attack them. To modify a roll, you roll the dice, then apply the modifier to the number rolled before comparing the final result to the target number you were trying to roll. Modifying dice might seem a bit complicated at first, but as you get used to your units and weapons, it will become second nature. It's worth noting that sometimes you can modify saves in such a way that it is impossible to make a successful save roll. Just skip rolling dice in this case in order to save time. So, Easy example here. So we've got this Space Marine Captain with the Relic weapon, which gives AP -2. So basically on all of the opponent's dice rolls to try and save, it's going to subtract 2 from any of the results, and in order to determine whether or not it succeeds. So as you can see here in this chart, obviously 2 is going to go down to 0, 3 down to 1, etc., etc. Basically, what they're trying to say is, say you need a 6+ to save, okay, but the weapon is AP -2. Well, then the best you're ever going to be able to roll is a 4, so therefore, technically, you can take all of those wounds. That's just a very simple example. Obviously, check with your data sheet, check with, what's actually happening. Don't just assume, but, again, just run those numbers, make sure you're in the clear, and if not, well, you just lost your Tyranid. All right. Modifying characteristics. In later issues, you'll receive units with abilities that can modify characteristics. For example, the Barbgon's Disruption Bombardment temporarily reduces the move characteristics of units that are shot by the Barbgons. You might find it useful to keep a pen and paper on hand during your games to keep track of any of your units that are currently affected by a characteristic modifier. All right, I'm going to change this a little bit, okay? They're saying that you should have a piece of paper and, kind of write it down. No, okay? Number one, if you are a player that has units that do these kinds of things, you should be providing tokens, okay? They don't have to be fancy. You could print them up yourself, or just get a piece of paper, cut it into little squares, and say draw a boot on it, and then like in this particular case, Disruption Bombardment. In your shooting phase, after this unit has shot, select one enemy infantry unit hit by one or more of those attacks. Until the end of your opponent's next turn, that enemy unit is disrupted. When a unit is disrupted, subtract 2 from its move characteristic and subtract 2 from advance and charge rolls made for it. Okay, so basically for one turn, you're going to be moving slower. So again, take a piece of paper, draw a boot on it, put a -2, okay? Instant -2 movement token. You don't have to go 3D print anything or buy fancy acrylic tokens. You can do that. But again, as the person with the unit that's going to be causing that effect, don't make the other person, do bookkeeping. Like I said, get a piece of paper out and write it down for each unit. They can get confused. Which unit does it apply to? Just make some simple little tokens and drop it down in front of the unit that's affected. That way, everybody can see it. It's very easy to remember. You don't have to think, oh, wait, did that unit get disrupted or was it that unit? Just, drop the token on it. Very easy to remember. Let's see. If a rule tells you to change a characteristic rather than modifying it by a value, you take this into account before applying any other rules that would modify that characteristic. A unit can be affected by multiple modifiers. If this is the case, apply any modifiers that divide a characteristic, then any modifiers that multiply it, followed by any addition or subtraction modifiers. If you end up with a fraction, just round the result up to the nearest whole number. Okay, so basically, sometimes you're going to have to do math. Not very often, but obviously, as they kind of describe it, you're going to try and go for the best result, okay? Dividing a characteristic first is going to be kind of a bigger deal. If I divide by 3 and then multiply by 2, kind of going to have a better effect than if I multiply by 2 and then divide by 3. So yeah, just make sure that you remember that. It'll be very rare that you're going to have to do multiple modifiers like that. It's not unheard of, otherwise they wouldn't have put it in the rules. But that is that. So again, these are really simple concepts. For me, I guess I should clarify, I've been doing this for about 25 years, so all of these things kind of make sense to me. But just remember, it's not designed to be complicated. They're not trying to trick you. They're not trying to do things that are going to make it so that you're not having fun. A lot of this is designed to be just kept very simple. So just remember, always round up. play fair with your dice, and like I said, provide tokens for the opponent if you're going to be doing stuff to their units that's going to cause penalties. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please do give a thumbs up. If I got something wrong, drop it in the comments. Let me know. I definitely want some feedback on these series. I'm using this as a simple example because it's already pre-written, but I am hoping to be able to kind of modify this series and look at other games in the future. So let me know what you think. Absolutely would love if you subscribed. And regardless, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.